Mixed is a good word.
All right, folks,
You know,
we are
like
live.
Thomas, I like-
Welcome back to Pangburn. Today we are going to be discussing the question, Christianity and Islam are immoral compared to Buddhism and Hinduism? Oh no! Well, it just might be the case. We're going to explore that today. So everyone pull up all their information they have on the moral proclamations from Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism. And if you can't do that, that's okay. I got it all here. So I want to start by comparing some categories, and we will eventually get people's general thoughts on this topic and pass the mic around and get into some moral discussions, this religion versus that religion. Of course, all of you know, by the way, I'm Travis Pangburn. Thank you for being a subscriber here. And if you're new, subscribe. If you like conversations, we have good faith, helpful conversations going all the time. Yeah, and we talk a lot about religion and God and atheism versus theism. So there's a few categories I want to compare here between Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism. One of the reasons I wanted to do this too, because I wanted to acknowledge that we have Hindus and Buddhists who play at Pangburn as well, and we can't leave them out. So we got to get them into the religious conversations here. I am going to actually, let me drop a link for you guys right off the beginning. Invite. Oh, and by the way, anyone who hears my mic kind of soft, I do have a new preamp interface on the way, so that's going to be improved. So join the live discussion here. Hopefully the Buddhists and Hindus will join the discussion. I know sometimes the time zones just don't line up, but I plan on rectifying that at some point. Let's pin that message. So now you guys have the Discord link. You can join our Discord channel. So yeah, let's start with hierarchy and discrimination. Sounds fun. Okay, Islam, the key issues. Gender inequality in inheritance, testimony, and marital roles. So the Quran's going to say things like Quran 4:11, men inherit twice as much as women. Someone is not muted and making noise. Spider face, can you please mute? There's just a little button on your screen and you just have to press mute.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I know you're new.
I'm trying to find it. Just give me a second, please.
Yeah, no worries. Oh, okay. I think he clicked server mute, or someone did for him, but he'll need to find the mute. Anyways, Quran 4:34, husbands are given authority over wives, including discipline. Hadith. Some of my pronunciations are going to be terrible. Just the Sahih al-Bukhari 5825. Women are deficient in religion and intellect. Quran 2:282. Testimony of one man equals that of two women in financial matters.
I think it's called Surahs. Like that's the name of their verses. I could be wrong.
Surahs? Well, it's
Yes,
Sahih in the Hadith. So no, I don't think so. It could be, but yeah, we can look into that.
No, I'm just being pedantic. Don't worry about it.
That's all right. Those are some key issues to demonstrate the gender inequality in inheritance, testimony, and marital roles in Islam. So let's go to Christianity. What does Christianity have to say about hierarchy and discrimination? So the key issues here are going to be subordination of women and acceptance of slavery. Ooh. Corinthians 14:34, 35, women should remain silent in churches. Ephesians 5:22-24, wives must submit to their husbands as to the Lord. Leviticus 25:44-46, slaves can be bought and inherited. Colossians, I think it is, or Colossians 3:22. Colossians. Slaves must obey their masters in everything. Okay. So far between Islam and Christianity, who sounds worse in this regard? I mean, with these examples so far, I think Islam sounds more harsh against
Well,
women.
it's horrific for women. Might be really nice for males
Right.
who follow the law. Who follow the law.
So yeah,
So
that's the thing. We are discussing in this first point hierarchy and discrimination. So yeah, so but you make a good point. Let's look at Hinduism. Now, listeners here are going to be less familiar with Hinduism and Buddhism as I am than with Islam and Christianity. So the key issues here in Hinduism with regards to hierarchy and discrimination, institutionalized caste-based discrimination and patriarchal control. Now, before I read this part, I want to just outline what a caste system is. So let me just pull up my notes here. Here we go.
Travis, are we going to be going back into the discrimination issue of Christianity?
We're gonna have a conversation as soon as I'm done comparing this information. So caste-based discrimination is a form of social stratification and systematic inequality rooted in hereditary hierarchies. This practice is most commonly associated with the caste system of India, but similar systems have existed in various cultures worldwide. Caste-based discrimination impacts access to resources, opportunities, and social mobility, and often perpetuates exclusion, poverty, and oppression. So, and the references for Hinduism here are going to come from Manusmriti 5:148. Women must depend on their fathers, husbands, or sons. So women must depend on their fathers, husbands, or sons. The must part is a problem. Not too bad so far compared to Islam and Christianity, in my opinion. Manusmriti 8:272. Shudras must be punished severely for insulting Brahmins. Now, Shudras, I have here, and make sure we're taking notes and paying attention because we will kind of open the discussion up on this in a second here. Did I lose my Shudras page? Yeah. Okay. So Shudras are one of the four primary varnas, social classes, in the traditional Hindu caste system. In this system, society is divided into hierarchical groups based on occupation and social responsibilities, as described in ancient texts like the Rig Veda and Manusmriti, which we were just referencing. So, and there's to spare everyone the pronunciations here, well, I'll try. The caste system consists of four varnas ranked hierarchically. That word. Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vyas, and Shudras. So the Brahmins are priests, scholars, and teachers at the top. Kshatriyas are the warriors, rulers, and administrators. Vaishyas are the merchants, traders, and agriculturalists, and the Shudras are the laborers and service providers. So in our last section here, we were referencing the laborers and service providers when we were reading on Hinduism, when it says Shudras must be punished severely for insulting Brahmins, which are at the top of the that system. Manusmriti 231, only upper caste men are eligible for Vedic study. Okay, so this is it is a pointing out a discrimination here. Rig Veda 1090 12, caste roles are divinely ordained. So there is the hierarchy and discrimination to demonstrate the institutionalized caste-based discrimination and patriarchal control in Hinduism. Then let's finish off with Buddhism. Then we're going to focus on hierarchy and discrimination. And we can add so many more things to this. So guys, collect your resources. Everyone on YouTube chat, get your resources together, put your quotations, whatever you want in the chat that's going to add substance to this conversation. Because we are trying to measure the morality of each of these religions and compare them with one another and see who's worse by our own moral standards. And maybe you have the moral standard of Christianity or Islam, but that doesn't exclude you from the game. You're part of this. So let's go to Buddhism. Now, the key issues here in Buddhism, gender and caste hierarchies are reflected in monastic rules and broader cultural practices. So the Kalavagga 10.1, women can only be nuns under conditions of subordination. The Theravada traditions, women cannot attain full ordination in some schools. Jataka tales, some stories reflect social norms of caste and gender discrimination. So that would be, that this one, the Buddhism breakdown here is very vague, and we can get some more information here. But so far to me, when it comes to hierarchy and discrimination, I got to give Buddhism the thumbs up here for being the most moral through my moral lens. This other stuff is very, very troubling, especially the Abrahamic religions here. So on hierarchy and discrimination, what do you guys all think? Do you have any more, examples you want to add to this, or what do you guys think?
And I'll say something real quick and just steer me back. But I don't know if there's any Muslims in the chat or on YouTube or Discord or on the video. I'm not Muslim. I'm like a vehement atheist. But I think to understand fully what the Quran actually says about gender and all this other stuff and what's the actual context for if someone is if you're a fundamental Muslim versus most modern society or whatever. I think, if I had to defend that position, what I would say is that look, do you want people like Andrew Tate or whoever, teaching you about gender relationships? And so, there's strict Sharia laws and all this other stuff. But most people would say that's the flavor of the day, and it's better to have the Bible doesn't really say anything.
When you say most people, Nate,
look what happened.
Yeah. So Nate, when you say most people, when referencing Muslims, where are you getting that data? Is that based on
I don't know if it's actual data, just folks that I've worked with or whatever in everyday life, So to me, that's also Islam.
Okay, well, let's check it here, because whenever someone says most or many or things like that, it always raises, hairs, warning signals on the back, and I want to know what the actual statistics are. So your claim is that, and I don't know if you actually believe this, but your claim is most people what in Islam with regards to gender? Most people think that women and men are equal. Would you say?
And just to maybe narrow the claim a little bit, if we're at least looking at theistic religions, so we're looking at Christianity and Islam, what I would say is I would switch that order actually, and I would say Islam has in some senses done more. And the reason is that I think Christianity supported the invisible suffering. Not that I don't know that in 2024 anyone needs a white knight, but in Christianity supported an invisible suffering, versus I would argue Islam did more for gender issues at some societal level than Western religions. So
although Islam's wrapping women in bags, right?
I mean, if we're talking about let's the litmus test is if we're talking about Al Qaeda, or we're talking about what was acceptable under the Taliban in the 90s and the 2000s, then there's going to be something that people are able to say about that. If we're talking about modern day, Al-Shabaab or something, or we're talking about even like Islamist elements that are trying to creep into maybe some weak parliamentary systems, then there's probably something that you can say back to that. But I don't think of a religion of 1 billion people or 2 billion, whatever the number is. I don't think of it like that.
Right, but you haven't mentioned any statistical realities or polling data or anything like that yet, right? So
no, I don't have anything like that.
Right. So then if you don't have anything like that, what do you think is justifying the belief in your mind right now? Is it just like,
so I would say this is my like political science background, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look at the history of constitutional law, if you look at the history surrounding it, like even in the very strict institutional sense, you look at the context that is necessary. And you could look at any specific court case, and when the Supreme Court said we have to go look into this, because some of the things you say are not about the specific event. These are larger claims. If the United States was or is a Christian nation, and demographically it was, I think there's this almost like apologetic motion for just, it's like, oh, we're not going to say that much, but that ends up meaning doing what you want. That's always doing what you want. So that's just my justification. It's not a great argument, but
okay. I hear you. So we might want to put some actual figures, depending on how your epistemology is framed. I just think as we start collecting data to support our beliefs and positions, we start moving further down the line towards a more sound epistemology. That's what I believe as someone who believes in empiricism and science and these methods of ways of knowing. So it looks like the countries, if we're talking about the burqa, it looks like countries where the burqa has been mandatory. So Afghanistan, to the present, the Taliban regime reinstated strict dress codes for women. And let's see how many, roughly.
That was only a few months ago, wasn't it?
2021 to now.
2021.
Yeah.
Got it.
So roughly
Cool.
How many women are affected by the new Taliban burqa dress code? Let's see. The Taliban's enforcement of strict dress codes, including the mandatory wearing of burqas, affects a significant portion of Afghanistan's female population. According to the World Bank data, females constitute approximately 48.7% of Afghanistan's total population. Given Afghanistan an estimated population of 40 million, this translates to about 19.5 million women being forced to be bagged in public. This is one country. We're going to look at more. Some of the language you use around this, Nate, I think it seems like it's geared to soften what's going on. Like I didn't hear you show any kind of outrage towards what this does to those 20 million, to their rights, their ability to be able to express themselves out in the world, to feel the sun on their skin, like these kinds of things. I find this, and I'm not saying you, but I find that this exists and is subjugated onto women to be one of the great evils that exists in the world today.
Yeah, and I would, this is on YouTube, so I feel weird saying it, but like personally, I am a little more outraged about a place like Iran, who has and again, not to sound like an apologist for the Iranian regime, but Iran has established university systems. They actually have better statistics and had better statistics for equality and things like education for a long period of time. And so when I see elements of Sharia law in Iran, it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I just don't know enough about Afghanistan in that case. But I do see it as a human rights issue too.
Okay. And I'm gonna check what you just said too. On I want to see how Iran rates on the global scale for women's freedom, because there are organizations. So that like the WPS, this is one I follow, Women, Peace, and Security Index. The WPS index evaluates women's inclusion, justice, and security across 177 countries. In 2023, Iran ranked 125th, indicating substantial room for improvement in women's rights and freedoms. The Global Gender Gap Report, the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report assesses gender-based disparities in economic participation, education, health, and political empowerment. And in their 2022 report, Iran ranked 143rd out of 146 countries, so third last, underscoring persistent gender inequalities.
But isn't that interesting? So it seems like Iran moved up, right? So you initially gave 1 year and they were like 100 something, and then the previous year they were 140.
No, that's a different organization. So that was WPS ranked them 125th out of 146 countries. But the global and that was in 2023, and then the Global Gender Gap Report rated them 143rd, third last in their 2022 report. The Human Rights Observation Watch has reported severe restrictions on women's rights in Iran, including limitations on personal freedoms, legal discrimination. Okay, that's then that one's not statistically relevant. So I mean, we're talking near dead last here, Nate.
Yeah.
So like you can always find little cherries of hope in these horrible situations. But I feel like those are weighing quite heavy on your lens of how you're viewing the Middle East, and that's fine. I have issues.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I understand that. I think like I'm not going to argue with social science data in that case. But like to your point, yeah, I don't know. I was just trying to add a different opinion because I didn't know if I'd see anyone in the chat that would defend that.
Yeah. No, fair enough. That's cool. And of course, we just covered Afghanistan there, but there are certain regions in Pakistan, Iran, we just covered a bit, Saudi Arabia as well, historically. So there are areas in Saudi Arabia that this has been lifted, which is great. I love to see progress there, and regions of Somalia. So we are talking about, hundreds of millions of women when it comes to the burqa alone, and that's one humanitarian crisis targeting women, I would say, out of many. And we're not going to. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say I would like to see something showing the time frame. Like, can we go back 60 years? Because if you look at Iran in the 60s and the 50s, like it was a bastion of like liberal thought and stuff.
Yeah, the theocrats got a hold of it after women were free.
I know.
Women are fucking free.
Yeah.
They were on the right fucking track.
Mm-hmm.
And then these fucking theocrats came in and wrapped them in a bag again. And for some reason, the rest of the world didn't see this as a humanitarian crisis or a crime against humanity, which I think it is.
Yep.
I think every woman around the world who's being forced to wear a burqa and not being allowed to express themselves in the way that everyone else, like I just think this is slavery, and all of those women should be allowed out of those situations. So it doesn't mean that war has to start, but mass busing, mass flights, mass transportation, refugee. I don't care the costs, the refugee costs that that countries would incur has to be done. Save the women. And these countries, like they're some of these countries just fucking struggle along and they can't raise themselves out of the dirt. And one of the reasons why is because they have half of their population who are just as smart and capable as the men running the country, wrapped in bags and hidden away in their house because their men are have been indoctrinated to be insecure.
So, hey, Travis,
certainly can't vote.
How would you feel if like, and this is a complete hypothetical, but like, let's say we looked at one of the nations that was majority Islamic, and we saw data that people are reporting they view women's rights issues, like we might talk about like public transportation or something. Like, I know that sounds really harsh, but what if there was other context? Is that line of argument is that convincing enough for you? Or
you mean if one was to say the burqa keeps women safe?
Yeah, well, they say it keeps them safe, or like, you do a poll in Iran and like, let's say it's still egregious. 60% of women say we need more, whatever it is.
Where my mind goes
and, but they're also, their level of belief is like the same way that we might talk about like airport security, or we talk about like changes in the Medicare, the Medicaid system, how you get your medication or something.
Yeah. My thought to that is when I think about like on Fox News, where Bill O'Reilly has infamously said when he's still at a job that like the reason why, or these young girls going out to the club wearing those short skirts, they're just asking for it, like, and I'm not saying you're promoting that idea or whatever, but that's where my mind goes, where instead of prosecuting the bullies and the bad ideas, we are telling women like, you guys gotta start packing, or you gotta like wear a burqa, or keep yourself, because these men are wild animals, like they will do shit. It's like, no, man, I think everything has to be done to free them of this, and we shouldn't go about this recklessly. But when we're talking about like what's the right thing to do, what are the good things that we should implement, that is on the shoulders of those doing the bullying and perpetuating this theocracy on these women, and not the other way around.
Yeah, no, that's a really good answer. I and not to fuel the Islamophobia fight or whatever, I don't think anyone's made that accusation, but I do. To me, it's just understanding sort of liberal democracy and life in our society. The morality and ethics component is that ends up being a little more important because you're never going to line it up otherwise.
Yeah. Well, those are good. I think those are great questions, and Scott brought up a great point there about this can be done. It has been done in Iran, and from my understanding of that period, Iran was just in an uptick growth in every regard at that period in time, and then freedoms of women got shut down, and all of a sudden there was a stifling of growth. There was a complete lack of progression, and all these old laws came back, and and I think it's a shame, but I do think it's a humanitarian crisis what happens to women in many parts of the Middle East, and that isn't to say there aren't places in the Middle East where women are free not to wear a burqa, and again, we're only talking about the burqa right now. By the way, there are some other crimes here, but again, we're talking about four religions here tonight. I want to get back. Sorry, Travis, just to put a bow on this. So, because my original complaint or argument was that only looking at discrimination in the Quran my claim was that only looking at discrimination doesn't solve the issue.
because there's more to it, and so it seems like that was at least unconvincing. That, I mean, generally I know Buckwheat as well, so that was unconvincing, unfortunately.
Well, we're looking at right now. All we're doing is looking at what the religious texts have to say about hierarchy and discrimination in this first part of this conversation. We're just looking at what are some commands, what are some texts, what are some things that are cited by the experts in the Quran, in the Bible, and are these being said today? So the examples I am using are being pulled from quotes of Muslim speakers today who say this on podcasts, and we can bring up specific. But I mean, everyone who's a fan of Matt Dillahunty here, a lot of these things I brought up about the Quran were his challenges against that. What is that guy's name? I don't know his name, but you know, these are not like just like ancient scribbles that no one pays much attention to. These are still cited as rules that should be followed. And you know, we can do a breakdown on exactly you know, who said what throughout history, but we are also going through 4 different religions here today. So now, is there anything anyone wants to add with regards to hierarchy and discrimination, even in your own personal experience in your life where you've noticed it, whether you're a Muslim, a Christian, a Hindu, or a Buddhist? Do you see Buddhists, Hindus, Christians, or Muslims in your life engaging in hierarchy, like scripturally ordained hierarchies and discrimination? Anyone else have anything to add? Nope. Okay. Well, we can go to well, I'm going to check out the YouTube chat because we do have lots of people on YouTube. Hey, everyone on YouTube, please take a second to smash that like button. We're going to be talking about Christianity and Islam. Well, the title of this stream is Christianity and Islam are immoral compared to Buddhism and Hinduism. So we're focusing on that proposition here tonight. And we will get into the, you know, why should any of our individual ethical appetites matter when in some of the cases, well, like in Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam, we're talking about, you know, rules and laws and ways to be good apparently handed down by gods. And in Buddhism, it's different, but we will get down to like why anyone's opinion should matter in this case, and we can talk about how the world is set up and how opinions do matter, and yeah. So violence and warfare. Key issues with Islam. Spider Face, can you mute? You're unmuted again. So you have to. You guys don't server mute him, please. He's got to learn how to mute himself. So just tap on the screen of your phone and find the mute button for yourself. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So the key issues with Islam here: justifications for war, violence against non-believers, and harsh penalties for apostasy. Quran 9:5. Kill the polytheists unless they repent. Quran 8:12. Strike the necks of disbelievers. The Hadith Sunan Abdu Dawood 4351, killing apostates is commanded. Quran 47:4, instructions for beheading in warfare. Quran 9:29, fight non-Muslims until they pay the jizya tax. So there's some violent instructions and commandments there. And then if we go to Christianity, genocide and violence justified as divine command. Deuteronomy 7, first to second, command to destroy 7 nations in Canaan. I think it's Canaan, right, Thomas? Do you know?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Command to destroy 7 nations in Canaan. We're looking at Deuteronomy 7, 1, 2.
Okay.
Canaan. Just the pronunciation.
Oh yeah, Canaan. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Joshua 6:21. Killing every man, woman, and child in Jericho. Numbers 31:7 and 18. Killing male Midianites and taking virgin girls as spoils of war. Luke 19:27. Parable seemingly endorsing punishment for enemies who reject a king. So genocide and violence justified as divine command should be a problem to everyone. I see we have Trey in the room as well. I believe Trey's a Christian. When we talk about genocide and violence justified as divine command, is that okay in your view? If there is a divine command for violence?
So with the genocide with the Israelites, it was, I would say that was kind of like a different time. I think we're making the mistake of cultural equivocation. So in our culture today, we have more of a liberal society where we look kind of down on those things. But yeah. I would say for the New Testament church, we actually go by Matthew 28. I don't know if you want to look that up, but that is our code of conduct as far as disciplining other people.
Yeah, but it's the same God. It's the same God that created all of this, right? And also the other thing is, like, Jesus didn't come along and say that was wrong or bad. In fact, he endorsed he endorsed the Old Testament, right?
So yeah, what he says was that there was a time for bloodshed, there was a time, and then there's a time for not. And if you kind of look at the other neighboring nations, they were killing each other, and if they came in contact with the Israelites, if they were under punishment under God, they would be killed themselves. So that happened a lot. But that's kind of like the issue here is cultural equivocation of us here now in our society judging them based upon those circumstances in that era when everybody was murdering.
So just real quick, God, let's take a time machine and go back in time, and we observe them doing slavery and all this kind of stuff. Because God is everlasting and forever, I would assume that his moral code doesn't change, or he doesn't choose it to change. I'm just assuming this based on Christianity. If I forgot where I was going.
No worries. Yeah, I mean,
I can help you there. So you're saying that God allowed slavery to happen. Therefore, slavery should be allowed now.
No. That's like divine command theory. Yeah, yes, that's what that is. But no, more or less, what I was talking about was like, God's, shit, man, I lost the word that I was trying to.
It's all
damn
good.
It.
It's all
yeah,
good.
I know.
So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's. I'm not judging the cultures of the age. Like they're following what God commanded of them, right? In the so-called holy book. I'm judging God. I'm judging God's morality here.
Because it's everlasting. So why would it change? If killing homosexuals and all that stuff was moral back then, it should be moral today because God doesn't change his morals, supposedly, right?
Yeah, and even if he does, like that still was bad and wrong for God to do. It doesn't matter that he's God. Me as a moral,
from my personal moral axioms, I agree with you entirely. I think it's immoral no matter what year it's in.
Yeah.
It's still immoral. The fact that they were ignorant of the advanced morals that we have today doesn't necessarily mean that it was a good thing that it happened. You know what I mean? It was very bad. There was a lot of suffering back then because of slavery and stoning homosexuals and all the old laws.
Yeah, Trey.
But there was also can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
So the suffering also, was with following other gods, and that was really kind of the main issue. And all the suffering, I know you guys are not going to like this, but that was put on God's Son, and that's no longer, that judgment is not for today.
Yeah,
because that has been finished.
So I judge, Trey, I judge God immoral for putting that judgment on his son and creating that whole play where it seems as though he has done something good by doing that or made a sacrifice by doing that. Like I again, that's just answering immorality with more immorality, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I know, and I'll admit, you don't understand. And I'll admit, like, if God does exist, which I don't think he does, or any gods exist, but if a God does exist, I can understand if you believed that, how it sounds silly for me as a silly, dumb, evolved ape to be judging that all-powerful God. But to me, like something being more powerful than me, like Putin is more powerful than me, right? There are probably advanced aliens that exist out there. I mean, based on the vastness of the cosmos, you know, I don't know this. I don't claim to know this, but I think it could be the case. But I still think if they came around and they had a similar story of what they thought was good, and they sent their son down to some alien civilization to be sacrificed, you know, I would judge them to be immoral for that as well. But
put it this way.
Yeah.
Let's say you were a piece of, like, you were a pot, okay? Like you were made of clay, and your purpose was to hold water, okay? And therefore, you took issue with the fact that you hold water, and you wanted to not do that anymore. I mean, do you really have a right to be against that, as far as the potter is concerned, of how you've been made? Because that's the issue here.
Well, a pot.
You've been made in his. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say a pot isn't having an experience. So it's like if I kick a rock, right, while I'm walking down the street, I don't think, oh wait, oh no, I kicked that rock. But if I kick a bunny rabbit while I'm, you know, walking down the street, actually, let me go like this for a second. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, I agree though that the lack of a nervous system is a pretty big position. Big
sorry,
point.
I was just taking care of that. That's the guy that fingered me on camera last time. So he has a ban for a period of time. I don't know. We forgot to ban him last time, but anyways, but yeah, what I'm saying is if I kick a rock walking down the street, my empathy drive does not come into, it doesn't get triggered, right? And there's good reason for that. But if I do that to a bunny rabbit, and I didn't mean to, if I kick a bunny rabbit while I'm walking down the street, I'm going to have some kind of empathetic reaction to that is much different than me kicking a rock. So, you know, the fact that, what's up, Exile? Welcome. The fact that, you know, that I can see myself in other life forms to some degree, lesser so in a bacteria or the first self-replicating nucleotide, but more so in a dog, more so in a cow, more so like, so I think this stuff depends. And no, I don't think that I think what you're getting at is like, you know, if you create something, that's your creation. You can do with it what you want. Myself as a moral,
I disagree with that vehemently.
yeah, and me as a moral thinking creature, I just can't get on board with that because my internal feelings do not allow me to. My feelings see that as a you know, as just a wrongdoing.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay. Okay, so I want to, unless everyone, unless someone has something to offer.
What I'm getting.
Okay, one more thing, Trey. I'll give you the last word here, and then we'll move on to Hinduism in violence and warfare.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that if you are made in the image of God, you are in the book of Genesis, what it's saying is that you are his imager. So the very fact that you take issue with kicking a bunny rabbit over a rock is the mechanism in which you were made. It's because you have that in you, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think we almost all of us have empathy drives within us, and also have desires in us. Some of it's meme level, some of it's gene level. But we have these desires to want to see good things for other creatures. No mystery. This is very, you know, it's very well understood in cognitive science and in how creatures come to have things like empathy drives. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree that's
was
there, but I would just argue that this is an evolved trait, meme level and gene level. Given enough amount of time, it shapes this kind of something that feels automatically triggered within me when it happens in my experience. But
there's an evolutionary psychology answer to this as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can give it, Thomas, and then we'll move on.
Oh no, I mean, it's just empathy had to happen, or we wouldn't care about our families. We wouldn't try to protect our young. We wouldn't care about tribesmen, which would you know, the more empathy you had, the more likely you were to survive, because you were kind and generous with all the people who were in your community, helping you to survive. Yeah, so I think it was something that was very instilled in us, to the point of where we were, you know, becoming actual Homo sapiens.
Yeah, and we see this in social creatures and social mammals, right? Like,
yes,
we see a lot of this, and it's different, right? Like the animal kingdom, which includes the insect kingdom, is you're going to have things where a praying mantis mother gives birth to, you know, hundreds of offspring, and then she's hungry, she eats a few of them without, you know, shedding a tear, right? There's just there are different life forms, you know, different biological machines doing different things out there. But let's move on to Hinduism. We went through, and guys, we're on the second category. We went through the first category of hierarchy and discrimination in Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism. Now we're on to violence and warfare. So bring up your favorite anecdotes and examples of violence and warfare in either Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, or Buddhism. So we are on to Hinduism. So sacralization of war and harsh punishments for maintaining social order are the key issues that I have here in Hinduism when it comes to violence and war. So the Bhagavad Gita 11:32 says Krishna reveals himself as the destroyer of worlds. Okay, now I'm starting to get scared. Destroyer of worlds. Manusmriti 8389, a king must punish wrongdoers harshly to maintain order. Well, what does harshly mean? A harsh smack on the butt? We'll have to look into that. The Yajur Veda 1143 encourages offering sacrifices to gain strength for battle. So we'll have to look at what those sacrifices mean. But you know, I'm sure like people's moral emergency systems start going off a little bit when they hear sacrifices with regards to a religion and what those sacrifices might be. So the Bharata glorifies war as a path to Dharma and liberation. So there's some glorification of war. There's some encouraging sacrifices. Let me see. I just as an interest, because I am way less educated on Hinduism than Christianity and Islam. So let's look at this a little more here. And people feel free to.
Can you tag me in when you have a second? I don't need to go first at all, but I want to say something here.
Yeah, you can talk right now if you want. Yeah, now's a good time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Just like with Hinduism, my biased perception is that like with the sort of inclusion of Dharma and stuff and yoga, I think there's a place where people see, like, if you talk about violence as a state that the world can possibly exist in, there's a place for it. I think they overstep a little bit when they say, just if I had to critique it a little bit, I think what, Hinduism says about violence, and there's this ability and almost an aspect of divinity or eternalness or something that can place war somewhere. I don't think it. I think this is like a realism issue where I don't think it actually places violence properly with what it's capable of and what it does. It seems like it's another, again, if you look at it as sort of like a spiral and understanding what war is actually like, I think that, an actual Dharma or yoga in the context of war in Hinduism is like, well, you're creating a situation that's only justifiable for a few. And so if it's only justifiable for a few, is it justifiable in the first place? And I think it undermines itself there.
Travis, I have some things pulled up about the similarities and differences between Hinduism and Buddhism, but we can talk about that in a minute. I think you had some other topic on your mind.
We'll get to that. We're kind of just going through these these 5 moral categories right now, but we can get into that. So we just reference, and thanks for saying that, Nate. We can look at more of the body of war and what it means in these contexts for sure.
Well, also just to close up the thought too, I think the other aspects of like a Dharma, when you talk about order within the universe and order within society and duties and stuff like that, again, I think this idea that, I don't know what the Hindus say about like trying to mimic or imitate God, or if this is just some individual pursuit or something like that. But it just seems like one of those far-fetched things where it's like, well, you're actually going to ask people to do that. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, Hindus are polytheistic.
Well, there's also we're going to get, it's monotheistic and polytheistic. So we will get into that. So Yajurveda,
but that would mean it's an impossible, like, this is like ordinary religion bashing. Like if it's an impossible, this is what I get out of Hinduism is like, if you're going to say that war is possible, but then you say it's an impossible standard to live up to, then like that shouldn't inspire valor. That actually, as a matter of fact, that it should. Well, it really shouldn't. But and that's my bad for but you should just look and see that it's an impossible claim in the first place. And if it's an impossible claim in the first place, then why would you do it?
Yeah.
Like why would anyone accept it as possibly being true or wisdom or its value or it's something like this? Yeah. Like I just don't know why like wisdom isn't one of the things people can talk about there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's great depths to this stuff and we might stumble onto more of it. So I do want to go through this verse that we just read here. So Yajurveda 1343 is part of the Yajurvedas, one of the four Vedas in Hindu scripture, which focuses on rituals, sacrifices, and the accompanying chants. While there can be some variation in translations and interpretations depending on the versions, the verse broadly emphasizes strength and support through divine forces. So the translation is here. May we obtain through sacrifices the blessings, because we wanted to look at what sacrifices are meant. What is meant by sacrifices here. May we obtain through sacrifices the blessings of the powerful and victorious divine forces. Let us strive with strength for prosperity and well-being. Ooh, I love that word. Well-being's my word, baby. No, it's not my word. It's everyone's word, but I love that word. And may the gods grant us support and courage. Interpretation, context in the Yajurveda. The verse appears within the context of prayers and invocations to divine powers during Vedic rituals. It reflects a prayer for divine assistance to achieve strength, virya, prosperity, shri, and well-being, kalyana. Now I know that well-being, by well-being, if I'm talking to someone, okay, kalyana. Okay, cool. Themes, strength and victory. The verse seeks divine aid to overcome challenges and achieve victory, often in a metaphorical or spiritual sense. Prosperity, it ties the act of ritual sacrifice, yajna, to the attainment of material and spiritual prosperity. Divine support, the gods are invoked as benevolent forces that provide courage and protection. The broader significance, this verse, like many others in the Vedas, emphasizes the interdependence between humans and the divine. Through ritual offerings, humans maintain harmony with cosmic forces, ensuring personal and societal well-being. Here's the modern relevance in contemporary interpretations. Strength and perseverance. The strength and victory may be interpreted as qualities needed to navigate life's challenges, as opposed to strength and victory in war or something like that, maybe. Harmonizing with nature. The emphasis on sacrifices can be understood as a metaphor for balancing individual desires with communal and ecological well-being. One thing I want to know is have the sacrifices here ever been human? In the context of the broader verdict, okay. Sacrifices primarily involve offering animals. Okay, here we go. This is what I wanted to know. Primarily involved offerings of animals, grains, clarified butter, milk, and other substances considered sacred. However, the idea of human sacrifice has been a topic of considerable debate and interpretation in Vedic literature and its historic practice. Let's see if there's anything relevant here. I don't think we need to go through that. But so I'm sorry if people find this boring, but I just think this is very interesting. But yeah, let me scroll back up to my notes here. Okay, we went through. Okay, that was the violence and warfare. I mean, glorifies war as a path to Dharma. I think that's worth looking at. Like in the Mahabharata, what is meant by war here? Just like Nate was saying there, war is a path to Dharma. So the Mahabharata is one of the most significant epics in Indian literature. Indeed, presents war as a complex path to Dharma, righteousness, and liberation. However, it does so with a nuanced and multifaceted approach, balancing the glorification of righteous war with a recognition of the devastating consequences. War is a path to Dharma. The Kurukshetra war, the central narrative of the Mahabharata, it revolves around the Kurukshetra war, a great battle between the Pandavas, symbolizing righteousness, and the Kauravas, symbolizing adharma or unrighteousness. The war is depicted as necessary to restore cosmic order and eliminate oppressive forces. The Bhagavad Gita's perspective. In the Bhagavad Gita, philosophical disclosure within Mahabharata, Lord Krishna encourages Arjuna to fight in the war as his duty, his dharma. Krishna states, Bhagavad Gita 2:31, considering your duty as a warrior, you should not waver. Indeed, for a warrior, there is no better engagement than fighting for righteousness. The Gita argues for a warrior class engaging in a just war is not only a duty, but is also a spiritual path to liberation if done without selfish motives. Justification for war. The Mahabharata asserts that war is justified when fought for the preservation of Dharma. Adharma's consequences, the Kauravas, led by Duryodhana, represents greed, injustice, and arrogance, threatening the social and cosmic order. Duty of warriors. Okay. And then, the criticism here would be mass destruction. The epic describes war as catastrophic, resulting in the deaths of millions, including innocent lives. The victors themselves are left devastated, questioning the value of their triumph. Okay, interesting. Okay, the philosophical takeaway. The Mahabharata presents war as a double-edged sword. It can be a righteous path if waged for justice and without selfish motives. It also serves as a cautionary tale about the devastating consequences of greed, ego, and power. A lot of this stuff sounds pretty good. What do you guys think? Anyone?
Yeah, it sounds fun. I don't really give a shit about the morals of
Hinduism,
Buddhism, or Hinduism, or Christianity for that matter. But I appreciate breaking it down and everything. But you have done a very deep dive into the moral aspects of how Dharma is perceived and how caste systems perceived and what's good and bad. The stuff that I pulled up is just general similarities between the religions and general differences between the religion. So, I just looked up a bit of that. But yeah, what you're saying is definitely interesting. I just I don't really care about their moral systems.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though when you go through some testaments or claims in old books, and you find that you have some agreement with what's being said, and some of the stories they used to teach seem quite interesting. It's kind of like when I first stumbled onto Epicurus, that I agreed with Epicurus on quite a lot about. I mean, there's things I disagree with Epicurus on, but this idea that friendship ought to be a daily practice, not something you try to squeeze in between everything else, but like we do here in the community at Pangburn, we practice friendship daily. I think that there are, I guess what I'll say is that I think there are great ideas in ancient history, as well as, and sometimes within popular religions.
Yeah, can I say something about Buddhism?
Yeah.
And sorry, this might be too much internet conspiracy theorist or something, but to me, it's sort of like this this small bird brain idea that I have, and I really think if we ask why, this is saying too much to describe the world. But if we to me, a lot of the sort of tenets within Buddhism are almost saying, well, if you're going to have a war and it's dharmic, it's evangelical in some sense or whatever it is, well, already what you're doing is you're doing this almost fine-tuning effect. That's what you have to be able to do, and that's necessarily driving the conflict. And so if you can't fit these sort of precepts of Buddhism within the war, well, should you be going to war in the first place? And I think the answer is generally no. And so, like, why was, Sun Tzu wasn't a Buddhist. Genghis Khan wasn't a Buddhist, and maybe this is just where they were born. Mao was a Buddhist. The Emperor of Japan during World War II was Shinto Buddhist.
The others were Confucius.
And so, like, this is
right? Is that right? Like, I can't remember, but
Taoist. Sun Tzu was Taoist, and
Taoist. Right.
I forgot what. I just had a Genghis Khan up on my browser, but he wasn't.
Have you ever had a conversation with?
That's the honest depth of my knowledge.
Have you ever had a conversation with Genghis Khan on ChatGPT?
No, but
I highly
it would be interesting to see what we could talk about. That I mean, that's one of those fascinating things. Who was it was a Great Ape yesterday was talking about AI and stuff and conflict, and it's just interesting to see based on like transcripts and training data.
Yeah.
What we would be able to even talk to Genghis Khan about.
It's
yeah. But I think that but like that sort of AI question of like is war like can war be fine-tuned, and when you're thinking about other people and other things that people are working on and stuff like that, can war be justified? I think Buddhism, my opinion is Buddhism does that incredibly well. And it's almost like when you appeal to it, this is the point I wanted to get across. If I can take 2 seconds on this,
keep going.
It's saying like if we have to say that like, well, Mao was a Buddhist, right? He was a technocrat, a bureaucrat. He was a lot of things. Emperor of Japan was Buddhist, and in Shinto, like it was almost like a state religion and stuff as well. He wasn't, it's not just Buddhist, but also a holy person. This sort of idea is like, well, if you don't, if we're talking about presidents and empires, if you don't have this thing that you can do everything from, then did you do it in the first place? Like, what's actually driving you? And then what else are you still able to say if you're not conducting a war in this way? And then you get the justifications that once you put a top hat on it, it's always the same thing. It's violence.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So we're going to go through Buddhism next year. We finished with Hinduism. It's great to have Nate here. I'm loving these insights. The key issues in Buddhism that I have here: exceptions to non-violence leading to potential misuse of teachings. So, Jataka Tales 537, Buddha in a previous life kills a man to save others. Some Mahayana sutras justify, quote, compassionate killing to prevent greater suffering. Historical justifications: Buddhist rulers like Ashoka waged wars before conversion. Kalinga War, pre-Ashoka, waged under Buddhist pretext. But I think that's really nitpicking Buddhism to try to come up with something that's relates to violence and warfare. A lot of that is like just like historic contextual stuff. So I mean, like, so far what I'm seeing is Buddhism gets the highest grade of morality for me in hierarchy and discrimination and violence and warfare thus far. It wins both those categories. Nate, what do you think? Based on your own moral standards, do you think Buddhism is the most desirable from a moral perspective when it comes to hierarchy and discrimination, violence and warfare?
Yeah, so like if I had to answer morality, I would say Buddhism. I like the mention of nonviolence, like that coming in. But like, and this sounds really brash, but I think the absence of actual like Hegelian content in Christianity would be the second one that, that's the one I would choose.
You would put Christianity in second place there?
Yeah, just because I think the fact that, my belief is that I don't think Christianity says that much about how like war should be waged, and I don't think it's even that meaningful. People don't take it seriously, so I think that's better than telling people that there is a world where God wants you to fight. I don't believe that. Yeah, it's not. And like the mechanism, I think, is just like, well, hey, look, if you can decide your individual morals and you have to go to war, then just go do that.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, we're going to get into the big, one of the big topics that is often talked about is sexual ethics and exploitation. So in Islam, we have key issues being, and some of these might not be issues to some people, but they're issues to me. So we have polygamy, child marriage, and sexual slavery. Quran, in fact, I would say we saw some of this play out in what Hamas did to the unfortunate victims of October 7th. So we have Quran 4:3 permits polygamy and I think it's concubinage is the way you pronounce it. Quran 65:4 implies marriage to prepubescent girls. For anyone that wants to look into that further, look at you can just look at Aisha and Muhammad. The Hadith 1422a, slave women may be sexually exploited. Quran 33:50, Prophet Muhammad allowed multiple wives for concubines. So a lot of really troubling things that someone who wanted to find, scriptural justifications for awful things could find it in the Quran and in the Hadith. Now, how about Christianity? Harsh laws on sexual behavior and gender roles. Deuteronomy 22, 28 to 29. Rape victim must marry her rapist. Genesis 19:8. Lot offers his daughters to an angry mob. Leviticus 20:10. Adulterers are to be executed. Romans 1:26-27. Condemnation of same-sex relationships is unnatural. Yeah, and I don't have it listed here, but stoning homosexuals to death, all this kind of great stuff that should be condemned, right? So because we have Trey in the room, Trey, what do you think about? A lot of this might be the same perspective as we went through before. I don't want to repeat a whole bunch of stuff, but have you ever struggled with your own moral sense and what you see from Deuteronomy, from some things in Genesis, Leviticus, Romans? Do you ever struggle with not wanting your own moral internal sentiments to point out that some of this stuff is just wrong and immoral?
Yeah, I did, but when it comes to reading the Bible, like I said, you can't really read it from a cultural equivalence factor. And the way I'm reading it is just kind of like how if you were to read, the memoir of Great or the career of Obama or something like that. Like they were all part of wars and things like that, and just war is a fact of life. You know what I mean? And so the issue comes down to, like I was saying in a different chat, that values are they're dependent on a group or an individual, and usually those individuals go war with each other because those values are not always like how you say the well-being of one group might not necessarily be the same as the other, and there can be an overlap, and then there's a contest. And so that's kind of how I see it. I just think that war is a fact of life, but like I said, when it comes to the New Testament, everybody who lived underneath those times were judged by God. And it was God that was doling out those judgments. The same way if Obama gave a judgment to send troops to Afghanistan. I mean, I just kind of like take in all that way.
Yeah. Now, and then what about like, okay, the issue of homosexuality in the Bible, for example, how does that work in your life? We have Christians going around saying like same-sex marriage is fine. God loves everyone. There are people who saying that homosexuality is an abomination, and we're not talking like back in biblical days. We're talking today, in the world today. Like, how do you parse that? Who's right, and what is your say thus far morally on that issue?
I mean, my issue is that I would say, if you read 1 Corinthians 6:9, what does it say? It says that homosexuality is a sexual immorality. But that's not the only thing that on your wife, that's immorality. I mean, he also says that.
Oh, can you start? Can
go
you go
ahead.
back? Can you go back like 10 seconds? You were just breaking up a bit.
Sure. So 1 Corinthians 6:9 says that when a man lies down with a man or a woman lies down with a woman, that is sexual immorality. And if that's what God says, that's what he says. Like, it's not, since I'm a Christian, I can't judge him. Those are his laws. And that's not the only thing that he says. He also says if you at a woman lustfully, you've committed adultery in your heart. So it comes down to the heart thing. But you are able to get forgiveness for that if you repent and believe on Jesus. But the thing about it is, we're all going to continue to sin. That's what the Bible says. However, God says that there's grace for us because of what he did to his son. And that's kind of, that's where I go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Now I see that as an immoral position. I don't think there's anything, bad or wrong about homosexuality. And when you started off by saying like, well, that's God's judgment. God, that was, isn't it also possible that some infallible or some fallible human author wrote that down because that's what they think?
Well, we have the original scrolls. So the Dead Sea Scrolls, they highlight Arsena Corinthus, which means two men in bed.
Yeah.
And if you can go all the way back to Genesis, that is divine prescription of how humanity should behave, is by multiplying. And when God ordained humanity with a man and female and ordained them to be multiplied. So there is such thing as called divine ordinance, as well as the law that he gave to the Hebrews, as well as he gave the laws that he gave to his church. But all of them correlate, but they're not.
Sorry, I should have been more clear. I'm talking about.
Say what?
I'm talking about original scripture, like where these ideas come from originally. The author claiming to be divinely inspired, writing this down. Isn't it possible that he either, because he's a human being receiving this message, that he could have mucked that up or just misunderstood the divine inspiration and wrote down his own ideas of what's right and wrong?
Yeah, so you're referring to Paul, because Paul is the one who wrote that.
Yeah, we can
was
say
actually
Paul.
Yeah, he's the one who is a Jew, but he actually persecuted the church before he became a Christian. And he changed on the dime because of his encounter with Jesus in the spirit. And he actually went for 14 years to fellowship with Jesus's disciples, as well as the Holy Spirit, he says, for 4 years. And so he basically had a complete change of mind when it came to the New Testament church.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I understand that, but what I'm getting at is like, how do you know it's not Paul's own moral
Well, like,
prescription and not divinely inspired? Like, how to? I'm taking a little side quest here to talk about, biblical reliability and why have faith that Paul actually got the homosexuality thing right. Maybe he got it wrong when he was in
Well,
this state
keep
of
in
divine
mind,
inspiration.
Paul was keep in mind that Paul was on his way to become one of the delegates of the Sanhedrin. So he was one of the people who stoned Simon Peter, and the delegates at that time threw their coats at the feet of Paul, and he was for that. That's what the Bible says. But also, the disciples of Jesus actually affirmed Paul's ministry because they were with him.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, they're all Jews. So they still have that Mosaic law present, but there's actually a divide between the Jews and other Jews because of the New Testament church coming in. There's actually conflict there.
Yeah. So I understand that, like, Paul supposedly writes this down, and okay, we can say for the sake of this conversation that there's some confirmation there of, but how do we know that all of that confirmation, what Paul's doing, isn't just like, someone saying like, oh yeah, if a man lay with another man as a man lays with a woman, he should be put to death. How do you ultimately know that that's divinely inspired and not just people writing their own moral ideas down or even communicating them back and forth and having conversations about it?
Oh, I see so you're basically saying all the way from the Old Testament to the New Testament, how do they know that they're divinely inspired?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. But I do want to stick on that specific issue so we don't get into too general of a conversation. And again, this is a side quest from the topic here, but I was hoping you had a quick, solid answer for that, but I assume we're going to get to a place where you're going to say, that's where my faith sits.
Oh, I think this is kind of like a question where you would have to ask them. But as far as I know, there are many scribes who wrote everything down as far as what happened in Israel. And it's kind of like a testimony thing. So They corroborated the fact that God gave them a temple, performed the miracles, brought them out of Babylon, brought them out of Egypt, and took them through the desert. So there's like a lot. There's also the story of John, who and the encounter with Zechariah, the high priest. So the Israelites, they didn't hear from God for a very, very long time. All of the nations were exiled. So that is kind of like the why it's very significant, because of Zechariah and his encounter with Gabriel. And Mark 1:6 says that all of Judea, they wandered. So it's kind of like this supernatural factor that you have to kind of take in consideration.
So everything you've just said here, all of this is based on what's written, right?
Basically, yeah. It's a faith. Like I said, it's a
because there is a circularity issue that I've had a problem with since I was 5 years old, when I started actually having some thoughts about religious scriptures and whatnot. But there's a circularity issue here, because when I'm asking you, how do you know that this was actually divinely inspired? You're using the text that in question to verify the divine inspiration.
So you're asking me my personal experience. I think that's what you're asking.
If that's what you would use to justify that, because I don't think you can, or at least I don't think it's sound epistemology to use the Bible to justify the divine inspiration of the Bible.
Well, I'll tell you this. My personal experience weighs into this. I've seen, because I've accepted God and that story, and that's based upon my faith. I've actually witnessed sort of supernatural things. Like, I actually used to dabble in the Buddhist stuff. So And I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but I actually used to do what is called like channeling. So I would actually try to pulsate flames and things like that. And there was actually one time where I actually encountered a supernatural entity myself. You probably guys don't believe me, but that's kind of one thing that shaped my faith, because I've also seen literature of other people channeling spirits. You can check out like some with the Enneagram and the Project Findhorn, which I actually linked. A lot of their language all kind of correlates as far as encountering supernatural entities. So even though my faith is in the God and things like that, I've actually seen and experienced other people and organizations. Project Findhorn is actually part of the United Nations for their spiritual caucus. And if you go look at that documentary, that is to me, that is an evidence that spirituality, as far as metaphysical encounters with deities, is a significant thing that we should be taking in consideration.
Okay, so a question about that.
Can I share an
Sorry. Nate,
Mm-hmm.
right after, I promise I'll let you in. A question I have about that experience, and again, this is, I question how you come to believe. Well, first of all, do you believe that this was a mind-dependent experience, in that your mind was responsible for creating these phenomena? Or do you think that this was a mind-independent experience, in the sense of this stuff was actually happening outside your mind, in reality, independent from you?
I'm gonna say it was for the encounter with the demonic presence. It was definitely an outward thing. Okay. There's this, you have this feeling of fear. Okay. You ever felt the feeling of fear, right?
Yeah.
This feeling of fear was more of like hopelessness, and I had no reason to feel that way. But because I was dabbling in sort of this channeling thing with flames and things like that, when I was younger, the room went super, super cold. So that's the first sign that I messed up. And actually, when I ran out of my room, I saw in the mirror the image of the entity. So that, I was young. I didn't take any drugs. I had nothing like that ever. And nothing like that has ever happened again.
Right. So,
however, that would be can I? I don't know if you guys know who James Lindsay is.
No.
I know who James Lindsay is.
I don't know.
He's funny.
Yeah, so he's like a mathematician, and he basically covers Marxism and a lot of different branches of beliefs that in Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and transhumanism and things like that. If you look at all of that, and sort of, you can actually see a guiding thread in all of that knowledge that he's referring to in great detail, and is actually right along the lines of the Hegelian dialectic of God says versus what he did not say, which actually begins all the way to the Garden of Eden.
Okay.
And that's what really shaped that. I actually really started to believe this when I started listening to James Lindsay, because of the oppositional, the cohesiveness of all of these branches of thought, of spiritualism, if you want to call it that.
Right. Okay. So I have one more question to ask, then we'll go to Nate, and then we'll get back on track with the episode today. But so my last question, because I'm a fallibilist, it is the first Pangburn virtue, and I'm always interested in what people believe with regards to fallibilism or infallibilism. Is it possible that you were dreaming, that you dreamt all of this experience? Is that at all possible? Or is it possible?
No,
it's not possible.
I would say no, because of the fact that when I got up out of my room, I went into my sister's room, and she actually verifies that experience. And she would tell you to this day that she could verify the fact that what had happened.
So she saw the entity and all that.
She said she knew something was there. That's what she says. She knew that something was wrong. Yeah, but she was actually in her room reading the Bible.
Well, and okay, I'll tell you what I believe honestly about what you told me, and I'll just be completely honest with you. I think you had one of these experiences that may have been you may have been dreaming, and this is what I think is most likely the case. You had some kind of dream, or you dependently within your own mind saw these things manifest, and you felt this. And maybe if your sister saw you engaging with something or having an experience, she knew, like you just said, that there was something going on there. But I think it's highly unlikely that any of this was mind independent. Not impossible, because I'm a fallibilist. One thing I would say to you is that you might want to think about that, even because you can't think about the ways that you could have possibly misread the situation, that you haven't even scratched the surface of the entire realm of possibility, which is seemingly infinite. So I would just argue for you to adopt a fallibilistic view of what occurred. But that's my 2 cents. But I do want to get Nate.
I will say, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Well, this thing had what I was doing was actually going on for a span of 3 days.
Okay.
So that's the reason why I say that. For me, I would say that this is not mind dependent, because it was happening for 3 days.
Okay, but isn't it possible an alien was beaming this into your mind and it was mind dependent? Like, if we start talking about the possibilities, right, we can get into every science fiction idea we could come up with. That's all I mean by possible. Is it possible it was Michael Jackson doing it to you? Because Michael Jackson never died. He's actually a all-knowing infinite being, and he's hanging out in a Harry Potter invisibility cloak in your room. I know it sounds impossible, but
No, I got you.
I
got you. I will answer that with this. I'll answer with this. So we were talking in the philosophy chat, and I would describe how we can observe reality, and the way that we're able to go from observing phenomena and observe its consistencies. That's the way I would say my approach to that experience was, because that's honestly how I think. I observe phenomenon, and therefore I label it. And so whatever I see that is consistent, that is consistent, that is what I would call it. I know what you're saying, like the Michael Jackson thing and everything like that, but this was a phenomenon, and it was a moment that was very consistent for an extended period of time. So I don't think that it would be fair to say that this was a case of aliens coming down, because that was not part of that experience. But
please be clear that I'm not saying that is likely that aliens were doing that to you. I'm just saying I would just argue that that's a possible scenario that might be playing out. Like, I just think we have cognitive limitations, and we don't necessarily have a good bead on what's always going on mind independently or mind dependently. But I want to get Nate in. Nate has been waiting very patiently. Nate, you had something here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, just since we're talking, because we brought up experiences and we're going through like these morality issues and whatever it is.
Yep.
I thought I would just share this real quick. I went to Catholic school, prototypical. I was the altar boy. My mom worked at the church, all this other stuff. And like, the thing I sort of realized is like, look, you can look at stuff like, like in the Quran, it's talking about polygamy or something, and that's just much worse or whatever. And it just like didn't take that much to me to like sort of think that like, well, like, hey, you know, like Mary's virgin birth didn't really mean anything, because that never happened. And so, you know, plus on top of that, you know, if you want to put makeup on it, you know, it also, you know, once you start talking about, you know, these just absurd concepts, like I didn't think there was like fundamental truth about those things. And so that was just my experience, is that like, you know, like, hey, if you can do otherwise, you know, if they're not talking about whatever the moral issue is in the way you want to, just throw it out, get rid of it, have skepticism, you know. And this was me at, you know, like, you know, whatever, maybe I was an angsty teenager, but like that's still one of the beliefs, being 35 years old, that I think that's fine. Like if you see a book that has something you don't like, you know, you're able to go elsewhere with it. You're able to, you know, whatever, find a different meaning or find a different book.
All right.
So that's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Cool. Does anyone else want to chime in before we move on a bit here?
Yeah, I wanted to circle back on something a line you were going through earlier and kind of refining on, which is this thing about the immorality of homosexuality and how it relates to things said by Paul and other things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I'm aware of, I'm loosely aware of, and I'd hope somebody would correct me if I'm wrong on this. My understanding is that Jesus didn't really make any statements about homosexuality. So I'm struggling to understand how it is perceived as being a divine statement that persists into the New Testament, apart from the Old Testament, when within the New Testament, the entity that is the voice of God, the Word, Jesus, doesn't make a statement on it, but instead we see the statement by Paul, who is a man, who we see as being flawed throughout the narrative for various reasons. So how are we interpreting any edict about homosexuality to be divine if it's not said by Jesus?
That's a question for Trey.
Yeah, it'd be a question for Trey, since he was the one corresponding with you on that.
Yeah. If Trey's still available. Yeah.
Okay, I'll answer it. Go to Genesis 2:24.
It's a New Testament. Jesus is the new covenant, so we can't look back to the Old Testament for that edict.
Go to Genesis 2:24.
Jesus just like moves aside the old laws. He sets the new covenant. How do we know that the new covenant homosexuality is wrong?
It's not true. He fulfilled the law. That's what it says. It doesn't say he removed it.
Okay, so there's a lot of stuff in Leviticus that we know is not a big deal.
Just go to Genesis 2:24. I'll show you.
Wait, how did we differentiate earlier that the cultural differences of how we determined that slavery is now a past ideal of the Bible, and you can't make the same argument for homosexuality, maybe?
The nation of Israel versus the New Covenant Church. And I'm about to answer all of that right now. Just go to Genesis 2:24.
Yeah, I have it here. I'm going to read it for the room. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. What of it?
All right, Mark 10:7-9.
Man, Mark 10:7-9.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is this a long thread, or?
Nope.
Oh, I think I've crashed my my AI software here.
Casey, sorry.
I believe I've got it.
Casey, can you say the question again? Sorry, I got lost.
You're good. No, like way early on in the conversation, slavery was brought up, and I believe it was Trey that was making the argument that that was just the cultural differences at the time. And we interpret the Bible differently now. So it's like, I don't understand.
We don't. We do not interpret it differently. We use canonical analogy to not an analogy, but logical a process of using the canon. So we don't interpret it differently. That's the. I think that's the issue.
So they interpreted it wrong back then?
No, canon. Like I said, it's canon. So Israel was a nation, and they were a nation that was theocratic. Okay. Today, the New Testament church is the new nation, but it is a nation based upon spiritual connection, not based upon a nation or a gene or a race of people, the way it was in the Old Testament. But if you go to Mark 10:7-9, it's Jesus who is speaking. Remember when I said Genesis 2:24, it says, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave unto his wife." Jesus is speaking in Mark 10:7-9, for this cause shall a man leave his father and cling to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And also says, let man not separate what God has put together.
So this isn't about homosexuality, and this is saying that divorce is wrong.
No, it's not. It's about
it is.
The divine.
What
no, it's
God
not.
has joined together, let no one separate.
No. God,
one flesh. No one separate.
If you go to Genesis 2:24, no, it's pretty clear. Genesis 2:24 does not say what you're saying.
I'm looking at Mark's 10:7-9.
Okay, and look at Genesis 2:24. It says the exact same thing. It says man and a wife.
So
yeah, that's not about homosexuality. It's not saying homosexuality is wrong.
So a lot of theologians,
yes, it is.
Trey, a lot of theologians are going to disagree with you. Like a common, a common interpretation is the broader context here addresses marriage, divorce, and God's intention for relationships. Is that the part you are representing, God's intention for relationships?
All right, look at it. It says, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, not his father and his father and his mother. That is prescriptive. Genesis 22:24, Mark 10:7-9, and is also in Ephesians 5:31 for the New Testament church.
A man could be an orphan. The text is not an exact mirror of what reality always is.
Your responsibility is to provide that context.
Okay, cool. So a man could be an orphan, and we should understand that Jesus gives a prescription to an orphan that is not different from his prescription to a regular man. We don't need to be persnickety with Jesus.
Right, that has nothing to do with marriage. That's your issue. It's not about the...
Gay sex doesn't necessarily have anything to do with marriage. Furthermore, if it's said, like, united to his wife, the two will become one flesh, so on and so forth, this does not preclude that other things could happen. This just says it's something that can happen.
I don't think you understand the concept of marriage is prescriptive in the fact that it is between man and wife, her husband and his wife. Doesn't matter if it's an orphan. The marriage is the covenant in which a man...
You doted on the father and mother thing. That's why I said, what if the man's an orphan and has no father and mother?
Every orphan has a father and mother. Otherwise, he would not exist. I don't think you understood what you were saying there.
I think I'm trying to get back to the original topic of when does Jesus say that it's wrong for a man to lay with a man?
Okay, how does an orphan come into being?
No, where does Jesus say that it is wrong for a man to lay with a man?
I just told you.
Yeah,
I don't think you want to.
You told me how people are born. I'm not talking about how people are born. I'm talking about things that people can do.
I didn't say how
a man lay with a man.
Very clearly, and shall join unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh.
Okay, that's something that can happen. Yeah.
Say what?
They can do that. That's totally kosher.
No, it's not they can do that. It's not they. That's the divine ordinance. That is a divine ordinance
that they can do that. Yeah.
No, not they can do that. You keep messing up here.
So if it's the divine ordinance, that the two will become one flesh, they will meet with a wife, is it a sin to be unmarried? Is that what Jesus said?
No, it's
okay. So Jesus is not saying you have to do this. Jesus is saying this is something God likes. But Jesus is not saying that God dislikes unmarried people.
No. I don't think you understand.
Do you think God
That is
dislikes
the
unmarried
only
people?
text. This is the only text that describes what a marriage should look like.
Okay.
Okay? That's all.
So
That's all I'm saying. Is there's
what
no
about
other
a man laying with a man outside of a marriage?
You cannot find anywhere in the Bible where it says that a marriage is acceptable or even blessed between a man and a woman and a woman. You will never find that.
So does that make it wrong?
What do you think?
There are lots of things that
I
you
think
won't
there are a lot of
find.
things that are not blessed that are not wrong.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're sidestepping the question.
If I could add to this, like marriage is one of those very sacred things. If he didn't mention it, then how would it be in that same, category of like, this is some sacred, thing? Like, he would mention it in that description of, it would be between people, not a man and a woman specifically.
I feel like specifically sin is something that's enumerated. If something is a sin, it's said that it's a sin.
So I
I'm
have
looking
something.
for a statement about this.
I have something to
if
say.
you read
about
Corinthians 6:9, it explicitly says that it is. So I don't understand what the issue is.
Enumerated is a really good word, because if you find the text, and like, let's just say we agree that, okay, so the Bible says a man and a woman, and so that's the same thing about talking about homosexuality. And so if this makes sense, there's two ways we can think about what the Bible says about homosexuality, right? Like, and I mean this 100% seriously. Like if we sort of add that epistemology or metaphysical layer, like, there's just God's law and it's just how our soul works. But like guys like Spinoza would say, we still have to find the order somewhere, right? Like, even if you don't see it right now, or you don't understand why the soul is like this, you still have to find the order. And so as you start sort of adding components like this into what the Bible says about homosexuality, like, again, as a non-believer, I went to church a bunch when I was a kid, but like, my perspective is that I think what people, what I think is important is the ability to find consistency as you start going into biblical teachings, and you actually try and understand what this could mean in the real world, right? Like, it's and so this is sort of like a more academic approach to understanding what like philosophy can say about the Bible, or about homosexuality. I think, because we're talking about homosexuality, right?
Yeah.
Like,
So,
and just in general.
My answer to that would be the fact that we do not have the Bible and the New Testament church does not prescribe for a theocracy. So meaning that we can blanketly implement laws to govern the laws and actions of individuals. However, it does say that in the Bible, if you want to enter into the kingdom, and that is actually referring to the kingdom of heaven, which is a spiritual concept, you have to repent of all of your sins, not just homosexuality. So we do not, Christians, and Christians according to biblical text, we do not police other people's actions. However, we are being Christian, because we are in a spiritual government. It's a completely different thing. If you could understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I just don't think. I think when we talk about the sort of sum total, if the Bible isn't an experiment, if it's not a sociological phenomenon, then we should be able to find consistent order within its teachings and the real world. And there's theological, there might be I think people would have to, if we're talking about order, people would demand that there's theological relevance, right? It builds something that's a little more linear, And so I don't disagree with what you said, but I think it undermines sort of the main point of that.
So biologically, when a man and a woman come together, what happens?
Doesn't matter.
Usually nothing. Like 99% of the time, nothing.
All right,
or about that.
They create children, and God's plan for humanity was to multiply. Okay, that's the issue. There was actually
that doesn't mean
rebellion.
everybody needs to make children. It's off topic.
And also,
I know, but when you come
some
together,
of them can't,
the concept of merit,
and also some.
But
of them
if you're a suitor,
also some of them cannot create children due to a flawed design in some cases, right?
yeah, I mean that's actually the issue with sin. It actually it causes illnesses, and some of those illnesses are being barren.
No,
but that is not to say that God.
I'm no. What about like the God believing Christians who are living by God's word, and she is unable to get pregnant?
I mean, I don't think you understand what you're saying. Every Christian dies. It doesn't mean that we're.
This is the fallen world narrative. It's God's plan when things work. When things don't work, it's a fallen world.
Yeah.
No, I don't think you guys understand. The issue with Christians is that your soul lives forever, not your body. The body has already been judged. So the whole concept of Christianity was to live forever in the spirit realm. The body is.
Why doesn't? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. I'm just basically saying that the body, every Christian dies. So that's the point is that you have a metaphysical spirit that is either going to be destined to live forever or die again.
But
so that's why they refer to.
But then why doesn't God talk about like why don't in those verses why don't people that were spoken to or spoken through by God, why don't they talk about brash or like impulsive decision making or something sounds more important, even if it's not that fun?
I mean, it also brings up the problem with believing that if you're predestined or preordained, then it removes the concept of free will because the end already exists.
You're talking about predeterminism, which is not a Christian faith.
Yeah. Well,
so
no, you brought that up.
No, I didn't.
We're kind of running off in like a really spirally way. I think we should pass back to Travis to continue.
And Calvin, to actual humans point, but that is relevant. Just sorry that I'll shut up. But the distinction, real quick, is that my understanding is Calvinism places that distinction of order on the philosophical, on the level of the individual versus talking about perfection in God's kingdom. It just assumes that the individual already has that sort of that order and perfection within them.
Yeah. Well, welcome, actual human. By the way, it's nice to have an actual. It's nice to have an actual human in the room for once. No, but we are talking today. We are comparing the morality through our own moral lenses of these four popular religions: Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism today. We have gotten as far as we didn't finish with sexual ethics and exploitation yet. We got to Christianity. We went through Islam and Christianity. Both of them, in my book, get really low marks. Quite very immoral things that the Quran and the Bible has to say about sexual ethics and exploitation. Hinduism, I wanted to mention some key issues: child marriage, commodification of women, and chastity tests. So we're going to see this stuff in like Manusmriti 994 recommends child marriage for girls as young as 8. Mahabharata, Draupadi is gambled away by her husband. So using gambling away your wife like she's a piece of property. The Kama Sutra, some practices suggest commodification of women in the Kama Sutra, which is interesting. Ramayana, Sita undergoes a trial by fire to prove her chastity. So some big moral issues there that I have with Hinduism, and we'll talk about this once we're all done, and we can go back to some issues in Islam and Christianity if you guys want to. But part of this is to also bring some information on Hinduism and Buddhism to Pangburn, because we do have a lot of Buddhists and Hindus in our audience, but we haven't wrestled with these topics enough. So in Buddhism,
what about atheism?
What's that?
I said, what about atheism and Joseph Stalin?
Well, atheism isn't a religion, right? But we can have that conversation at some point. Atheism doesn't have tenets, dogmas.
I think we should have that discussion for Trey's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you. Thank you for thinking of me.
Because he does not know what atheism is.
Well, atheism, at least the way I use it, the way Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, all these guys, all the atheists I know, it's simply a lack of belief in the propositions that are brought forward that gods exist. But I also defend, as I did with you one day, Trey, I think I'm a Gnostic atheist, so I'm happy to defend that position as well, in that I know gods don't exist. But anyways, Can I
say something about Hinduism real quick too? Just very short.
Yeah, we are on Hinduism. Does it have to do with sexual ethics and exploitation? I would love it if it did.
I think so. I mean, it's sort of it's a similar point.
Yeah.
But that I made about Islam earlier. It's just that I think a very common interpretation of a lot of Hindu texts is that when they talk about things like virtues and stuff, a lot of it is like practical social virtues.
Yeah.
And I think it's things like living moderately and, making sure you're respecting teachers and stuff like this. And so, I don't know enough to defend a position, but I know that there's that side of things about those stories.
Nate, the Christians, Muslims, everyone's going to say the same thing about their text that you are saying about you're just mentioning for the world that there's context. Everyone understands there's
the peanut gallery.
yeah. Everyone understands there's context to these things. Today is not that we're going to do high level masters scholarly dives into these religions and the text and the context and the apologetics on all of this stuff. But we are just giving everyone a flavor of the translated texts that are used and talked about a lot in the circles of these religions. I just wanted to. We had someone here that I gave permissions to, but I think they dropped out. That's okay. So Buddhism. Let's get through Buddhism, sexual ethics, and exploitation. Then we can open up that topic generally and talk about some different things. So the key issues in Buddhism being rigid sexual ethics and occasional portrayal of women as temptations. Again, the key issues with Buddhism, man, like Buddhism just keeps winning by my moral standards and getting a pretty solid thumbs up as being the least problematic to me. So let's look at some details here. The criticized passages or practices. Vinaya Pitaka, monks, this is from Vinaya Pitaka, monks who violate celibacy vows are expelled. Compared to the other religions, not too bad. Some Jataka tales reflect gender biases, often showing women as obstacles to enlightenment. Ascetic traditions sometimes discourage healthy marital relationships. So if you're into marriage, there might be some discouragement towards healthy marital relationships. So again, for me, I'm just going to give my score on sexual ethics and exploitation. Islam, Christianity, and Hinduism, bad. I think Islam and Christianity are basically just as bad as each other on this issue. Actually, I'm gonna give Islam the check here because of as the worst, as because of the the issues with child rape and especially in the case of Muhammad and Aisha. So yeah, I'll give Islam at the bottom of the barrel there, Christianity close to it, Hinduism second place, and Buddhism least problematic in my view. Buddhism has won every category so far for me: for hierarchy and discrimination, for violence and warfare, for sexual ethics and exploitation. Wow, maybe I'm a Buddhist, but so what does everyone think about sexual ethics and exploitation?
Are we splitting Buddhism between the Mahayana traditions and the Theravadic traditions?
They've been lumped into one for the sake of this conversation.
Okay.
But
a lot of the very traditional, I guess, for lack of a better word, ethics around like sexual abstinence and women being viewed as this like solely as like this temptress thing. A lot of that is Theravadic Buddhism. A lot of like if you go into Mahayana Buddhism and then like further into like the Judo Shinto religion, it's very much like, oh yeah, and then we keep going.
Right.
It's a very relaxed religion when it comes to that.
Yeah, sexual exploitation and that stuff. It seems to be pretty mellow, and I love that. You know, like I love you know, if someone's going to belong to a religion, what I care about most as a moral well-beingist is maximizing well-being for myself and those around me. If I see a religion trying to do that and not stifling the human condition, you know, having rules against homosexuality or things like that, those are going to find the religions are going to find the bottom of the barrel very soon, in my view. I wanted to welcome BJ. BJ, your mic should be connected now. If you just unmute your mic, if you want to say hello, welcome to the chat. You might have joined us from the YouTube chat, but if you're just here to listen, that's cool too. Thanks, Actual Human, for giving us some insights there. What does everyone else think? How do you think the Abrahamic religions here stack up against Hinduism and Buddhism so far in these categories? To me, it's quite clear that the Abrahamic religions have the most issues if we're considering well-being as the moral metric here. And feel free, anyone, to unmute if they want to add to that. And I know Trey seems to be the one here defending the Christian faith. I don't know if there's anyone else, but for me, Trey, it's quite clear to me that thus far the Abrahamic religions and what they have to say about these issues, and we're just talking, you know, we're kind of just talking about the text as it's been translated and extracted for the sake of this conversation. So a lot of problematic things in Christianity.
Sorry, I'm making pizza.
Sorry.
I disagree.
I figured you would.
No, so the Abrahamic religion was, is the Mosaic laws are born in a time of war, but not just because of war between man, but because between war of the heavens. And so God needed to establish his law. He condemned humanity, and no man could pay that debt of what was to come as far as judgment, and he put it all on his son, who is beloved son, Jesus, and he paid for it all. And all you have to do is accept and believe, and you do not have to pay for that judgment. Sounds pretty fair to me.
No, I think you do have to. You do have to pay in the same way that you have to pay the mob, or else something bad's going to happen to you. So I think there is a payment owed, unless you want to sizzle forever, right? Do you agree with that, or?
No, what mob are we talking about?
Well,
that's not a tenant.
It's the old mob relationship, right? The mob shows up on your door. Let's say Christianity shows up on my door and says, "Hey, or let's say God shows up on your door and says, "Hey, I'm God. Here's what I offer. Here's how you can enter the kingdom of heaven," or we can say Jesus for this example. And just so you know, if you don't follow me, if you don't do these things, if you don't live according to God's word or will, or by Jesus's example, there's a special place I've created for you where you are going to burn, forever, or until the end of time. And I can hear George Carlin ringing in my ears when I'm reciting this. But he loves you. Him. He loves you, and but he needs money. That's the way I view that kind of like, it's like a mob showing up. It's like, you better get on with us, or else something bad's gonna happen to you.
Yeah.
It's like,
love me, or else. Follow what I'm saying, or else.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a misrepresentation. I would view it as like this. Let's say you violated a bunch of laws that you had no idea that you violated in the United States of America. Let's say you come from a foreign nation and you're breaking all the laws, you don't know it. Then the officer drags you before the judge and he says, you violated this, and this is your sentence because of our laws, because you law-abiding land, because there's law and order, and that's how we govern ourselves. Then he says, however, you can either pay for this, or there's this man over here. He's going to come and he's going to pay it for you. But it's up to you to accept that.
Right.
Which do you choose?
So nothing, but nothing about that escaped my example. It's like, but we've done this for you, but you have to accept it. And if you don't accept it, this is what's going to happen. It's not.
And once that man pays your debt, if you accept the debt that man's paid you, now you have to follow him forever.
Yeah. So the thing is that, like, even with that, it's the understanding that to follow his rule is actually what you would want, and it would create a better living for essentially everyone. Like, that's sort of the idea, is that it would be what you would want.
Yeah, you all know that from experience because you live in the United States of America. You have law, even though you didn't.
Look, if you come along with me, I'm gonna take good care of you.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna let you come to harm. I love you. Yeah. You will have all the love.
I already sacrificed my son for you. Isn't that enough? Come on.
Yeah. But anyways, like, you guys understand, by the nations that you live in, they all have laws. You all have to abide by them. You didn't get born into them knowing them, but you had to learn.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you all.
I don't go around not killing people. I don't not kill people and not rape people because of the law.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, man.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I hear this all the time. It's like, you got born into.
No, we already addressed that.
That's why he doesn't do it. Is what he's trying to tell you. If it wasn't there, he'd be raping and stabbing and.
Come on, man.
What? Did I say something wrong?
You're,
hallelujah.
Let's not call
you all.
Yeah.
You all grew up in a culture where that was illegal. You are all shaped by your culture because of the laws dictate that you do not do that.
Human nature can do that too.
Do you think, like, human apes, as we all are, with empathy drives, almost all of us, there are people born without them and they need help, but
exceedingly. So I'm a marriage and family therapist.
Yeah.
We do not have any records of people being born without those things that have not processed undue trauma.
Right.
No record.
Yeah. So it's like, there have been so many civilizations, human civilizations, that are great examples of, like, they didn't necessarily have a codified law written down about a lot of like the way that, let's say, Canada legislation is laid out, where everything is codified and there is some kind of representation of almost everything, like even including, like, sound pollution by use of your car horn, right? These kinds of things. So yeah.
But put it this way: if this is all evolutionary, from the civilization that had quote unquote no laws, which does not exist anymore, and they probably sacrificed babies to sun gods and all that stuff, till all the way till today.
Yep.
we have a highly codified societies that we live in. So we all know that from experience, that there are laws in the land that we have to follow. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah,
There's no different than what God is saying.
But I think people are talking about here that like you can be born in like well for example, for me, a lot of my moral prescriptions were not grafted onto me or it did not dictate to me what is right and what is wrong the same way that the moral pronouncements of, say, the Bible does that for you. It's a much different experience. I think I have had a rational relationship with my epistemology in trying to move through my experience, sensitive to which virtues I find are the best for farming wisdom, for just as an example. So that's been an experiential, growth and pursuit and failures and victories, and I'd say that, like, one could claim that, without the Canadian laws, you would have just, been a complete nutcase out there. But I just don't see evidence of that through human history. I do see evidence of people doing terrible things. But if we were talking earlier today about like Steven Pinker's Enlightenment Now and the work he has done to show us like how in general humanity has the average human throughout history has been the kind of human that if they see an old woman who they do not know in their community fallen on a trail or in the street, or they feel a moral need to go and help them up, to help them. That is the average human. The average human is not the sacrificing children to God type human. So it's important for us to have an empirical relationship when we're talking about like the nature of man and looking at the entire picture, and not just going through it with, like we were talking today, like a negative utilitarian calculus, or what I call a suffering avoidance calculus view of viewing humanity and human history. Like I think it's important to just like look at the entire picture. So
I would agree with you there, but what I would push back on that is, if the laws dictate that you do not help the lady in the street because of some sort of regime saying otherwise, most people would not do it for the sake of their own personal well-being.
No, I don't think so.
That's the only.
That's not true.
I think that's an argument for prohibition.
No, yeah,
you can in the Holocaust.
No, prohibition. Yeah, no, smoked weed all the time until it became legal.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, like we can look at weed. We can look at what happened when they tried to prohibit beer. Like, I mean, fair enough. That's not always the case, and we are talking in very grand general terms, but I just wanted to say that I love Steve and the work he does, and Pinker's books are great, and Enlightenment Now is a great breakdown of humanity's progress and growth through a lot of these things you're talking about, and talking about the general human, and it's a great book for people who are pessimistic about human nature. And pessimistic for no good reason, I would say, for reasons of this suffering avoiding calculus or negative utilitarianism.
Can I say something about Pinker as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to, this is again, sort of like my, like teenage college age, the sort of thought about Steven Pinker is, I haven't like skimmed or read through his stuff in, it's probably been a decade. Yeah. It's difficult, I think, given the actual research and data that Pinker was able to produce, that like as a society, we have a decision sort of away from at least embracing ideas within atheism or embracing experiences that talk about the world in a different way, or embracing like tolerance about religion or something like that. There's just like not a way to get into like that topic or something. When we see that like humanity has gotten more peaceful, and that there's like totally new like data sets about belief being non-theistic and stuff, as well as, you know, redefining and reinterpreting what traditional religions have been and meant.
Yeah, I mean, Pinker's going to outline basically how well-being for people in general, for humanity as a whole, has gotten better by different well-being standards within the suitcase of well-being, like health, wealth, safety, education, overall happiness, environment, like all of these things, human rights as well. So
the Bible was used for selfishness, though, like with slavery or to hold hierarchy and monarchy.
Well, Niv, before we get into that, because we did go through the slavery and discrimination, I want to welcome Sean. Sean, you're new. Welcome.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We also got Do. Is that your real name? No. Feel free to unmute and say hello. But Sean, do you have anything? Have you been listening to the show? Do you have anything to add here?
I've been listening a little bit. So I would add to start with that I'm actually Luciferian by belief.
Okay.
It's quite atheistic in that sense.
Okay.
But I can make sense of like all the stuff everyone's saying. There's like this one common like core thing that it all comes down to, you know, and then we just branch from there and it becomes more subjective. And it's interesting, but it's quite scary for people to face the world without like a framework of some sort.
Yeah.
You know?
So what out of yeah, I mean that's cool that you're Luciferian. So you the key principles of Luciferianism are enlightenment and knowledge, individuality and free will, balance of light and dark, rejection of dogma, which is I love. So yeah, there's some good virtues hidden within this stuff. We're kind of having a specific conversation about comparing Abrahamic religions to Hinduism and Buddhism. Do you have a general sense of where you like, and we're kind of just like making moral judgments tonight, and we're being the judges tonight. And I tend to find the Abrahamic religions to, when we're looking at human well-being, to in general be a much greater risk to human well-being than these other two religions. I don't know how you feel about that, Sean.
Yeah, I think, well, you look at it from the surface and things like the Eastern religions and that look more calm and just feel more wholesome, I guess, on the surface. So, like...
Yeah. And that's not nothing, right? Like,
and as far as... Yeah, as far as Christianity goes, and things like that, Abrahamic religions rather, I guess they've served a very big purpose, but I guess like the people who are leading the way of it are sort of getting swept up along with it too. Like there needs to lead a way that changes with people.
Yeah,
I feel like.
I hear you. Spiderface, we haven't heard from you yet tonight.
Are there? Can I ask Sean a question?
Yeah, you can ask Sean a question, then we'll go to Spiderface. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious because, you know, especially like I think on like Discord and Reddit, like you don't meet Luciferians that often every day. So do you mind sort of sharing, like, is there like a primary moral teaching, or what's like sort of encouraged in terms of a value, or like what like an organization or like what like a person is supposed to be doing?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question, man. And I'm over in Australia, by the way. There's nothing like public around here where I couldn't meet anyone anywhere that shares these beliefs. But, so yeah, it's more of like a framework of being able to sort of really believe in this, I guess, epistemological way of reality, and then go from there and like discover that your brain can imagine God or can dream, or you can do all these things with your mind, but it's irrelevant to whether there is a God or not. And it's like kind of cool. Trying to master.
It's very, very in the same line as Buddhist thought.
Yeah, I suppose like it's more of a modern thing. They've taken a leaf out of a few different books, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot. Yeah. Cool.
The Luciferianism, is it LeVay's or Satanic Church? Satanic Temple?
Yeah, it's beyond, like, it's more modern than LeVay sort of stuff. A great author in it would be Michael W. Ford.
Okay.
If you were interested, he's got quite a few books, but, you know, it's not for everyone too, because it's kind of like a rebellious of the spirit in a way, which can be a bit uncomfortable for some people, especially later on in life.
I was about to ask, is it where you do alchemy on the objective reality?
Not so much. More something like, you know, you might map out some sort of, I guess, like a custom-made Kabbalah, or like a map of like where things might fit in your mind, and then just observe how that happens, almost like a semi-meditative state over time, to then understand like, oh, this is what my brain does, and where can I change it, you know?
How would it tie into Christianity?
Like you were saying, oh, yeah, sorry.
How would it tie into Christianity? Because I just thought, like, Lucifer was bad. He's the devil, right?
Well, he is a fallen angel in a sense, so there has to be some sort of connection there.
Kind of like the figure that's rebelling against an unjust God. Like some
I guess that's where like a lot of people might get the emotional connection from it.
So you believe in you believe in him as an angel, not as the devil.
Yeah, it's like at the end of the day, like my belief, every time I think of God, that is like an extension of my brain. And yeah, I could call it God and love it in the same way Christian does, but the core thing in my brain knows that it's me doing it. So it's like more of an archetypal kind of setup. So it's quite atheistic.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's really interesting, Sean. Thanks for sharing that. Spiderface, what have you been hearing tonight of interest, or what do you have to add here?
I just have a.
Oh, you're hard to hear. You might be muted. Like I can kind of hear you, but it might be your mic. Mic placement maybe.
To be honest, I'm not sure how to use this, but I just want to ask the question to the theists. If murder was a misdemeanor by law of the land, would they commit murder?
Yeah. So that was for you, Trey, and I believe the question was if
answer is yes.
If murder wasn't a law, would you commit murder? Like, would you use that as a tool to navigate society?
No, because the concept of being made in the image of God is that you have His law in you, and that's where you were alluding to as far as like being empathetic towards people and stuff like that. We have that, but it's written in us. That's why stars, fire, written in your heart. That's what that means. There doesn't need to be an actual codified law in the land for us to all know that killing is evil. Because
you don't have to believe in God.
Because
then.
God is.
You don't have to believe in God then, because you wouldn't do it because it's written in you. Is what you're saying?
The only way that you know that is because God codified that a long time ago. Because before in the issue with Babylon, the Bible says that everyone did what was right in their own eyes until the law was introduced by Moses.
But then doesn't that, Trey, contradict what you were saying earlier in that, if you were born, the reason why you don't kill and do all these bad things is because you were born into these laws?
Well, that would be a factor into it. I mean, I would say.
Okay.
Because that was a whole part of Christianity. You're saying this is why I do this because it's got laws and you're not to do these crimes. But then again, you're saying it's already in you, so it wouldn't matter if you're Christian or not. You can be whatever.
No, that's not what I said.
Oh, brother.
Well, anyways, let's move on for that. I think there might be a contradiction there, but we'll leave that to the few people who will come across and maybe review this tape in 1,000 years when this is archived. I wanted to say hello to the longest name I could make. I love the name. Sir, is that your real name?
Not yet. Hopefully soon. I'll make it official.
So what do you have to add tonight? Thanks for joining us.
Well, I think it's a great subject, and it kind of shows the experiments, right, that been running on society. Like in the Middle East, you have these revelations, Abrahamic stuff, and I said earlier, Buddhism all the way, because I think they don't focus on revelation. They're just paying attention to the mind. They're paying attention to the nature of how things are, right? Like when you start meditating, you pay attention to yourself. You can find a lot of stuff there. It's pretty interesting. And I think they're closer to what's actually going on than whatever, you don't need to think, you don't need to believe in like virgin birth, to behave, to be like a good person, right? Or something like that, right? We understand the value of those stories or making people behave, but I just think it kind of points to like different mentalities when like you need to behave because otherwise, some of this bad thing will happen to you. And then the other camp is, dealing with the nature of the mind, right? Like desires of when you get something that you really wanted, then it's just, you're on the next thing and it's just never satisfied. You kind of addressing the stuff, so it kind of makes you happier or leads to becoming a monk up in a mountain. So you're not hurting anybody, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah, interesting. And it seems to me that you can practice Buddhism without being asked to sacrifice your epistemology or any of your rational enterprise to be accepted or to feel as though you have done enough to embody Buddhism. And and going through this moral exercise today, thus far, when comparing Buddhism to the Abrahamic, the popular Islam and Christianity and even Hinduism, I think we would live in a much better world by my own moral standards. I use well-being as a moral metric. I think we would have improved ability to maximize the mental health, physical health, and social health of individuals on this planet, and it wouldn't be stifled in the way that it currently is by some of the dogmatisms that still exist. I would say in the most dangerous area being radical Islam at the moment, and still some very, very stifling practices in Christianity and in Judaism as well, right? So we didn't put Judaism on the list today because we're trying to contrast the two popular Western religions with the two popular Eastern religions. But yeah, what do you think, Trey? I saw you unmute there.
I was just going to say, Judaism rejects Christianity. That's all.
I wanted to add that what you just said, Travis, the well-being is like a great measure, right? And I think that's what all the religions were trying to do, just maximizing well-being, but they all have like different challenges, right? Like these people over here can't stop, worshiping balls made of gold. So let's just give them something for these people. That doesn't work for other people, and that's what I mean by running experiments, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to call you Long, Long. That the biggest challenge, perhaps, of course, being ignorance. Ignorance is a massive challenge. When we look back at human history, I actually agree with you. Like many people who were inventing religions, having visions and whatnot, a lot of this was channeled into trying to create a better world. And I just think that, when you have this like seemingly endless sea of ignorance in front of you, and you only know a few things, you're inevitably going to create laws and ways of being and rules that are just are just so inevitably going to lead to problems that you couldn't foresee, because your epistemological standards could only be so sound based on what was available to you at that time.
People can only write things that are inside of their frame of reference. So we can't, like a blind person can't write about seeing, and a deaf person can't talk about the way that words sound. So a person that grows up in the desert and has a very brutal family will write laws and prescriptions for what it's like to be in the desert. And then if we take that and we apply it to like a Pacific island, none of those laws are going to work or transfer at all.
Right.
Yeah, and it just to land that point, I mean, there's like this island where there's people that they don't have contact with civilization, apparently. I don't know how true that is, but yeah, right. And so let's just pretend, I don't know if that's completely true, but let's just say that it is. And it seems that it is. So I think they are also human. So they're running this like human, like default way of being. I mean, they might be eating each other because of some weird belief that they run in their minds or something. But they're still there. They're still alive. They're still thriving, whatever their norms or rules or whatever it is. But I bet you $100 is not Jesus, and it's not the Virgin Mary, and it's not Buddhism, and it's not, maybe it is. That's actually what I think is more appealing about Buddhism, that it's not based on, it's just based on introspection, right? That's what I will call it. But everything else is just this, like Travis was saying, I think, like, how do you justify how they're trying to, in my opinion, that one thing that they're trying to do is, okay, but that's like just your opinion, right? Like, who says that that's what we should be doing? It's like, oh, well, actually, you won't believe who I just spoke with up in that volcano. I gave you this tablets there.
Yeah.
And even within Buddhism, I'm going to paraphrase that the Buddha was like, hey, I was meditating and I had some ideas and I might be wrong about this, but like, this is the way that it is. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Look at that. They know. I mean, they are onto something. Like that. I don't think they even believe in free will, like in Buddhism. I don't think that's very compatible with the way that they see things, because I don't think they hold people responsible for how they behave. Like, they see them as just a consequence of whatever nature gave them. That it's something to that nature. I don't want to misrepresent it, but so far where I understand, that's how they see things. And every other religion, they that when they run into that issue, they tell stories about where their free will is coming from. Like, you actually can choose, and that's why God is punishing you. And Buddhism doesn't do that. It's like, it's just desire. It's just this pulling that you have in your, in your insides. When you pay attention, like, you can tell what's happening, right?
So in like Buddhism, Hinduism, you're starting at base level. Everyone is equal. We are usually innately good. And then in the Abrahamic faith, you are born into sin. And so you are starting at negative numbers and trying to work your way up.
No, that's not true, man.
No? Okay,
I mean,
okay.
Okay. That was how I was able to interpret it, that if you are born and not baptized, then you end up going to purgatory, which is a punishment.
Yeah, I don't know.
So we are starting at base and negative, and then you have to enter the religion to go up.
Who interrupted that? Was that dude?
I believe it was Trey that jumped in.
Oh, it was Trey. Oh, okay. I don't, you guys, I do want to plow through these last 2 points. We've gone through comparing hierarchy and discrimination, violence and warfare, sexual ethics and exploitation. We still have to go through harsh punishments and religious exclusivism. But before we do that, something near and dear to my heart, very important, that's coming up is the Pangburn 5th annual Day of Giving, where I go out onto the streets of Hastings Street in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I give out food based on donations from the Pangburn community. And we usually do instant ramen packages because they're very inexpensive, very practical for people who are living on the streets who need food and they don't necessarily have great places to store food. They're also very light for people. Canned goods can sometimes be too heavy, especially for elderly people living on the streets. But anyways, there's the GoFundMe link right there. Last year we gave out 8,000 meals, and we've done 13,000 meals to date for the annual Days of Giving. So if you can spare $5 or something to throw towards this, you'll see our video once I finally publish the video. The reason why I videotape us doing this, it's not a way to exploit the homeless. We don't like hold back food and they have to do an interview before they get or anything like that. It's just to document that we are doing this, and that in turn encourages many more people to donate to the cause. So that's why we do that.
Yeah, Travis, hopefully on the live stream after you guys do that, I used to go volunteer. I don't, unfortunately, I hope someone can throw in a couple bucks for me, but just like the experience of being involved with those kinds of things, like, some people are whatever, but like for some people it's actually really meaningful. It's like a weight being lifted that that they didn't know was possible or didn't believe someone would be capable of doing something like that, I guess.
Yeah. It is the best feeling ever. And that's what I try to, and thank you for saying that, Nate, because I try to remember to say that all the time, that it is the best feeling ever. And, you can be a part of it by donating, but even being here, contributing to the conversation, because this live stream is generating revenue that goes towards things like that for Pangburn. So, thank you all for your support for being here and engaging in the conversation, and especially to everyone on YouTube who hangs out and watches. Thank you so much for that. So there's the GoFundMe link. If you want to donate in some different ways, then GoFundMe, just get in touch with me, or you can drop a YouTube tip or whatever. Anything tipped will go towards that.
Like, just sort of.
Niv, you're unmuted. Okay, quickly, I want to blow through these things, then we'll open up the discussion for anyone else who has anything new to add, and then we will wrap up the stream eventually here. Niv,
I have something.
Yeah. Hang on, Niv. I'm going to get through this stuff first, then we'll get to you. I promise, brother.
The United
Sorry.
Yeah, please mute just for a second. So harsh punishments. We're going to go quickly through Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism. Key issues for Islam: punishment seen as disproportionate and inhumane. So Quran 538 commands hand amputation for theft. And the second example I bring up here is adulterers are stoned to death for being adulterers. Key issues for Christianity: capital punishment for minor or consensual offenses. Deuteronomy 12, 18, 21. Rebellious sons are stoned. Leviticus 20:13 calls for execution of same-sex acts. Hinduism: discriminatory and excessive punishments for caste-based offenses. And this comes from Manusmriti 8415. Tongues of lower caste individuals may be cut out for insulting Brahmins who are at the top of that caste hierarchy. And for Buddhism, graphic depictions of torture and unforgiving penalties for monastic offenses. Naraka, hell, descriptions include extreme suffering. Vinaya rules enforce permanent expulsion for monks breaking vows. Okay, so try to remember your comments on harsh punishments. I want to get through religious exclusivism. But again, with the harsh punishments, for me, Buddhism gets the the green check out of these four religions of being the least problematic based on my own moral metric of well-being. So religious exclusivism, Islam, religious discrimination and coercion. Quran 929, jizya tax imposed on non-Muslims. Quran 385, only Islam is accepted as the true religion. That's a big one. Christianity, exclusivist doctrines marginalize non-believers. John 14:6, salvation is only through Jesus. Deuteronomy 23:3, exclusion of Ammonites and Moabites. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced. From the assembly of the Lord. Hinduism, marginalization of lower caste and non-Hindus. Manusmriti 10:129, the Shudras, which we went on to explain are the bottom of that caste system, which are the workers and laborers, are excluded from religious wealth. The Athra Vedaya 12:562 excludes malicious groups from the earth's prosperity. And there's quote unquote malicious groups. And then for Buddhism, the religious exclusivism, sectarian attitudes toward other Buddhist schools. Lotus Sutra, Mahayana Buddhism critiques earlier traditions, Hinayana, as inferior. Okay, so we went through some of the potential moral issues, the criticized passage or practices relating to.
Hey, I gotta go. I'm gonna take off. Thank you, everyone, for letting me join. Bye.
Peace, Nate. Thanks for being here. Are there any thoughts on harsh punishments or religious exclusivism? Again, I think Buddhism seems to be, this is commonly the highest critique of the exclusivism of Buddhism, and I don't think it's a very strong one. And same with the harsh punishments. There's some descriptions including extreme suffering of Naraka, which I guess is hell in Buddhist texts. And Vinaya rules enforce permanent expulsion for monks breaking vows. So again, Buddhism to me least problematic. But I'll open up the mic for anyone who wants to add anything.
Just quickly, don't they all seem like it doesn't really matter what it's believed, so long as everybody agrees, and whoever doesn't agree, that's the guy that gets punished. That's kind of what the a purpose of this will be, right? I mean, if they believe sincerely about this stuff, whoever doesn't, because otherwise you got like 20 people believing different things, right?
Oh yeah, like
and
this
it
is
just
I guess
becomes
the question,
yeah.
the question here is more like, how the hell do people believe these things?
Yep, that's a good question.
Rather than
yeah.
the other way around.
I mean, I would say
Yeah.
chance, right? I mean, circumstance, whatever. These people live in the desert, it's harsher, whatever happens in there, right? But for me, I don't think it's any special, what they believe is, or what God, or being more true than others, and when it comes to religion, or there are Abrahamic ones.
Yep. Niv, did you have something to add? You were trying to get in earlier.
No, I was going back to the point where Trey's argument was for Christianity was to follow law, and you have to follow the laws to not commit any crime. And I remember one of the people in the chat said, I think that was exile. Like, what are you trying to say? Like, we'd be raping and killing if we weren't, if we didn't have these laws to follow. And but the argument later on was it's naturally codified in you, in where you don't have to. You don't have. It's something that doesn't necessarily. Because later on, a question was like, well, what if you weren't exposed to learning it? And I think his answer to that was that it's naturally codified in you. Why you wouldn't do it?
Yeah.
Why in other words, like it's like he's arguing against having to having to adopt Christianity. I mean, if it's something that's naturally in you, but I mean, like, yeah, I went. It's a contradiction. You see what I'm saying? If it's something that's naturally in you, anyways, then why you have to adopt?
Why do you need the laws? Yeah.
Why you have to adopt the faith?
I mean, you guys are saying the exact same thing. You guys are saying the exact same thing. You're saying that if there were no laws that said to not rape somebody, you would not do it. I'm actually saying the same thing you're saying. It's just that we have a different interpretation of where that originates.
Well, I would
Yeah,
say
I mean,
would say internally, we have internal mechanisms that give rise to feelings like empathy and different things, and there's some meme level or some gene level stuff like that, but then there's also meme level stuff that we learn basics from our upbringing and from our environment. So there is a meme level, gene level element to these things, but I don't see,
It's like you're saying Christianity is in your programming.
Yeah, but I just, as a physicalist and as someone that relies on correspondence criteria of truth to inform my epistemology, I don't see any good reason to believe that there is anything inside me that was written by any kind of creator, like a god or anything. I just don't see it.
I mean, I get that, but it's still there. That's what I'm saying. It's just like we just have a different interpretation of where it originates. But either way, we're saying the exact same thing.
Yeah. I actually think you okay. Yeah, that's clear to me. If you say that there is this feeling inside of us, like, regardless of whether or not there's anyone there to uphold the law, and maybe you're traveling in a part of the planet where there is no law, and you're still gonna, like, and like, yeah, maybe you could get away with, stomping a bunny to death or something, but are you going to do it? No, you would probably shudder if you saw someone else doing it. Like we do, and I think you agree, Trey, that we have a moral sense out whether or not, whether or not there's a law or not. So I think, that kind of clarifies.
I'm not following though. Whether or not you adopt Christianity, it's still programmed in you.
He believes that God has written these things on your heart.
Oh, right? So I don't have to bother learning it then. I don't have to adopt Christianity, so I can go to Buddhism because it's naturally in my programming.
You need to. There's some programming, but you need to learn based on the society that you are in. Right? Like what the society accepts, or you're gonna get punished, right? That's where going back to the point, like Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, there were rules, like you need to do this, don't eat this, don't do this, right? That kind of stuff, because it's coming out of the psychology and the society at the time, right? Like that's what they needed people to do in order to, don't get sick, or don't be as violent, and just be as right. But those are those three religions. But when you comes to Buddhism, I don't know a lot about the punishment. Actually, it's kind of surprising to hear that there's some punishment. But I think it's coming from the psychology of the people, right? I mean, it's like you conform to these things that are kind of coded in us, but then, different experiments of societies and peoples come up with different rules depending on what they need, how violent they are, how savage they are, right?
I'm trying to follow. We have to follow laws of the land, society, but I'm also being told like it's also part of our nature. It's coded into us by God.
Okay.
Yeah. So the thing with
I do want to. Trey, I'm gonna wrap the stream up there, but we can continue the conversation down in the off-air chats, guys. We have a philosophy chat down there if people want to, keep talking about the existence of God. Or we also have Trav's Tavern, which is a more casual hangout place. We got lots of voice channels here. Everyone's welcome. If you have any problems with, you feel like someone's not acting in accordance with the rules of the server, just tag admin, and admin will come in and police the issue. Don't try to police issues yourself. Just step away from them if you see problems, but do report them. We do rely on the citizens of this community to report problems if there are. So thanks to every new member, all of our old members that were here today. Thanks for the great conversations. I thought it was a fun episode, and it was fun for me to read through some information on Hinduism and Buddhism today. It was great. Everyone on YouTube, please make sure you drop a like on the way out, and consider joining us on Discord here. Our community is all about fostering good faith, helpful conversations on any given topic. And by good faith here, we mean sincerity of intention. So if you come to Pangburn, make sure you have the sincere intention to have good conversations. And then also you have to be helpful. We task you and charge you to be helpful here at Pangburn. And an example I use, when you're having a conversation with someone, instead of trying to like beat them up or beat them down or debate bro them or whatever, reach out a helping hand and try to help them represent the strongest form of their argument. That's the goal here. So thank you everyone for being with us tonight, and we'll catch you on the next live stream, probably tomorrow. Good night.